Hi, my name is Paula and I'm a new mom. Welcome to We've Probably Been There, a podcast by First Moms Club about how we really dealt and truly felt about everything motherhood. No BS, no judgment, and no advice, from us at least. Welcome to the club. This is the story of when we decided to step away from the storm to leave room for a rainbow to shine in our life with a baby after miscarriage. I hope you had a chance to listen to our powerful podcast about feeling and mourning a miscarriage with Alex and Vanessa. We are now joined today again by Alex and Vanessa, both Vanessa, mom of 2, and Alex, mom of 3, who have graciously accepted to share their stories on how and when they were ready to try again and all the feelings that were brought up in the process. So, hello.
Hi, Paula.
Vanessa, just to quickly recap from the miscarriage podcast, you didn't feel the feelings that, you expected to feel when you had your miscarriage.
That's right.
So let's start with you and take us back to, when did you decide that you were ready to try again, and everything, all the feelings and all the emotions that went through, that part of your life.
Yeah. So after I experienced my miscarriage, and I didn't, as I've said in that podcast, didn't feel the emotions that I had expected. I would feel, and didn't deal with it in the ways that I think I assumed normal women typically deal with that kind of event in their lives. I felt very quickly ready to try again. I think I mentioned in that podcast that my doctor told me that women are typically quite fertile after having a miscarriage, and then I just made a very detached decision to try again. It was, I mean, I was given this advice that I would be fertile quite quickly after, so I thought, okay, well then that signals to me that there's no better time to try again than now.
So when was that? How long
So I
after?
had a miscarriage, and then I think I wasn't really prepared to try again, like sort of that following cycle. I regained my period quite quickly, and sort of in spite of that advice, I still needed to take a beat. So I think that sort of that first cycle we didn't try, uh, but then the following month we did, and sure enough, we got pregnant. And so it It was, my maybe whatever mourning I would have felt for that miscarriage was also cut short, or it never materialized because I got pregnant so quickly, so that all the feelings of a new pregnancy kind of overtook and eliminated and made me sort of forget all of that episode of miscarriage, as it were. But got pregnant again, and I think that second pregnancy, if I remember well, is characterized by just a feeling of like, well, that a miscarriage happened once before, so you're kind of on your guard all the time for every single little sign that maybe you might be miscarrying, or something might be going sideways. So that second pregnancy for me is really characterized by that constant sort of state of vigilance of like you are hyper aware of your body. Every day, every sign is of like, could this mean that maybe I'm miscarrying?
It's stressful.
It is stressful, and until you get that first sort of ultrasound or confirmation of a viable pregnancy, you don't truly believe it. I think. I mean, you hope with all your heart. At least I did, but you can't really claim, success until you have that confirmation. Just like the peeing on the stick and the seeing the lines or the plus is just not going to cut it for you at that point, because you've already been stung once, and it you know that it could all go sideways very quickly. I know Alex lives that as well, but so I was on my guard, but I still let myself live those feelings of, happiness that we had been able and been so lucky to be able to conceive again. I tried to focus more on that we were lucky, than to dwell on the miscarriage that I just lived. I think now in retrospect, and we touched on that podcast. I would have let myself feel those feelings more. There was a lot to unpack there. But at least in the moment, that's how I lived that.
Alex, can you relate to anything Vanessa's sharing?
Yeah. I mean, the idea that after you suffer a loss, if you don't, you're just aware of it. So after you get pregnant, it's that constant feeling of, but I know that it's not, it couldn't be not permanent. That makes like I could lose this one again. I also think that I was older when I had this miscarriage and then got pregnant again. So I knew there were more people in my vicinity who had had a loss. So I forget about my specific miscarriage. It was also like I knew so many people that had had loss at different stages in their pregnancies. So it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to surpass where I had my miscarriage, which was at about 10 weeks. So like when I got to 12 weeks, did I feel better? No, because it was just like it could happen at any point. So the idea that you're like on high alert 100%. And when your body is on high alert constantly, like you're exhausted. I think also
it's draining.
It's so draining.
Yep.
And I had 2 kids at home and it was deep COVID when I was pregnant again. So I was home. Like I was isolated at home and stressed and nervous and going to every doctor's appointment by myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't the funnest pregnancy.
I was just going to say, was it an enjoyable pregnancy?
No. Yeah, I got pregnant, I think like a couple months later, like maybe like 3 months later.
Okay.
I immediately knew I would try again, but I needed to take a beat too.
Okay, so you gave yourself a little bit of
I
grace?
don't think I was consciously thinking about it.
Okay.
I don't think I was like, I'm going to give myself 3 months and I'm going to have a plan.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, not right now.
In that time, did you ever think, I feel a little bit bad to try again. I feel a little bit guilty trying again because that would mean that I would have to put the baby that didn't live in the past. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like
yes,
I'm afraid to forget about this child that would have been by replacing it with a new one.
It's a really good question. I'm just thinking. I don't think it was, I don't want to replace. I think it was, you're still thinking about it. You're still, or I was still mourning. And then also, like, it's hard to have, you can have 2 feelings at once.
That's,
things we say to our kids. It's hard to do that.
2 things are true.
2 things are true.
Yeah.
But these are 2 big feelings.
Yeah.
And it was COVID. So I miscarried March 7th, 2020. Right? When I went to the hospital to like whatever,
expel.
I had to like, they were like taking, it was like the beginning. Like they were taking your temperature as you walked in. Like it was the beginning. So then, there's also a feeling of like the world is literally falling apart. And also my world is falling apart and everything is falling apart. And what is happening? Yeah. I don't know. It was weird. It was a weird time. And I was quickly, I don't know. But I definitely knew I wanted to have another baby. And I don't remember exactly like when, how many months, but it was certainly a couple of months. People at that point were having babies alone in the hospital. Remember, like there was that time period.
That was awful.
Yeah, we'll cover that later.
When I was pregnant or just got pregnant, people were still going through labor by themselves. And I was like, I think I could do it. Like, I think if it was my first, I would be like, hell no, I can't do this by myself. But I was like, 3rd baby, figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was consciously thinking about that. Like, could I give birth by myself? I guess I could figure it out. I don't know. That was a weird
So
side
you
tangent, but
kind of like bounced back and said, I'm ready to.
I was confident in the labor part. I'll say that. But the whole pregnancy at the back of my mind, I was like, I don't know. Never know. You're never confident. The first time I was pregnant, I was confident. I was like, loving life.
Mhm.
No,
It's
not the third.
I think when I went on to have a successful, let's call it successful pregnancy with my first child after my miscarriage, I didn't have any issues or anything. It just carried on being a sort of very vanilla, I guess you would call it ordinary pregnancy up until labor, but that's maybe covered in another
Another
podcast.
podcast.
but then when I had my second child, I realized that I had somewhat been scarred by my miscarriage experience because with my second, Alice, when I was at week, I want to say 8 or 9, I experienced spotting. And I mean, I'd qualify it as maybe more blood than is spotting. It felt to me like I was probably having a miscarriage. And having had one, I was like, oh, this is it. It's happening again.
Yeah.
And I remember calling Chris, my husband, and I'm saying he was going out at a park, but further
Rock
away from
climbing?
our
Just
house,
kidding.
at a park further. And I said, "You'd better come home, I think, because I think I'm miscarrying."
Oh God.
And I called my doctor. Said, "Well, I wouldn't just say that so quickly. Was there clotting? Was there tissue?" And I said, "No, it's really just blood, as far as I can tell." But I said, as far as I understand, you're not really supposed to bleed if you're pregnant. And she was like, "Well, it's not quite as simple as that. So you might be miscarrying, but you might not. And I can't tell you.
So?
So don't just assume." And so I was like, wait, hold on now.
It's very
Like, I'm bleeding. I've experienced a miscarriage before. So I know, like, I knew where
What to
this
look
was
for,
yeah, where this was heading. And so she said, "Well, I can't see you right away, but I think you should go to the emergency room and um, see what's going on there." I did, and I waited and I waited because I couldn't yet go to the maternity ward, or
Mhm.
because
You were too
I was too early.
early.
So they did an intravaginal ultrasound, and then I heard the most magical sound, and I was on my own because Chris and Emma weren't
Yeah.
going to wait for hours and hours at the emergency room. But all of a sudden, they're like, "No, no, it's fine. There's a heartbeat there," and I was like,
was
so-
that the first time you heard the heartbeat?
"Yes." And I hadn't heard it before.
Right,
I
'cause
just
it was early.
It was early, and then the doctor said, "I think you're probably fine. I don't know why you're bleeding. I can't explain that one, but you're probably fine." And that was the biggest relief because it taught me that, not all blood, for instance, is necessarily a sign of miscarriage. It's not so cut and dry. I wasn't clued into that at all. I was like, blood, miscarriage.
Yeah.
And I 2 weeks later, they wanted to see me again to make sure everything was okay. And I went on to have a completely normal pregnancy. Otherwise, after that, no, I never bled again. And I think I was, being signaled that, things aren't necessarily, you shouldn't jump to conclusions so quickly, is what I'm trying to say. You can have unexpected things happen in early pregnancy, as you can later on in pregnancies, and not to always assume the worst. But having had a miscarriage makes you assume the worst.
Do you think after that moment in your second pregnancy, because you had 2 pregnancies after, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, that's why.
So
yeah.
with the second after the blood, and then you were fine. But were you as on edge for the second pregnancy as you were for the first?
Nope.
It
No.
progressively, you got chiller, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
Is there something to be said, with the feelings regarding, a rainbow baby when people say, I've had 3 pregnancies, but you've actually had 4 pregnancies and you
Yeah.
have 3 children. So
Yeah.
how does that play?
So I think that while I won't correct someone, like if someone off the cuff is like, yeah, and you've been pregnant 3 times, I won't be like, sorry, I've actually been pregnant 4 times. Like, I'm not going to do that.
No, because that opens up a
But
whole
in
can of
that
worms.
moment, am I thinking it? Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
I will say I have 3 kids. Like, I think I would approach it more like that. Like, I have 3 kids. I've given birth 3 times. I was in a situation also with my miscarriage where I didn't have to give birth. I think it would be more complicated in that situation if you actually had to go through labor that other time. But I don't correct people, but I am definitely thinking it.
And because your miscarriage happened after your 2
Yes.
kids,
Yes.
would you have had a 4th after?
No.
Okay.
3 was what I wanted.
3 was what you wanted.
4's a lot of kids.
Tell me about it. Well, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
4's a lot of kids.
Okay.
And I like kids and babies. I actually really like babies.
I like babies.
Yeah.
It took me a while, but I like them too.
But it wasn't like I miscarried and that took one of my pregnant. Do you know what I mean?
That's what I mean.
Yeah, no. It wasn't like I was willing to only be pregnant 4 times and therefore this is one of my pregnancies and because it didn't work, I went down to 3. No. I wanted 3 kids. 4 was too many. So when I was considering the name for my rainbow baby, I loved the name Iris.
Sorry, did you know she was going to be a girl?
Yes.
Okay, you'd known the sex.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's enough surprises. I never felt like I needed to have that as a surprise. It was just for me. I considered the name Iris because it means rainbow. And I thought that was such a lovely tribute to the fact that she was a rainbow baby. And then I also think it's a beautiful name and I really love it. I just didn't, in the end, feel that it was her responsibility to kind of bear the weight of the miscarriage that happened before her.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like...
In your eyes. Because she wouldn't have known. I mean, you would...
Maybe she wouldn't have known. Or maybe it would have been part of the story of her name.
Right.
But it was just like, she's her own individual.
Yeah.
And it really had nothing to do with the loss I had before. And I just felt like it was connecting something that wasn't connected.
That you just pinpoint something that was my question all along and I couldn't phrase it properly. Go. Do you feel like your rainbow babies were somewhat of a consequence of your miscarriage?
No.
But like a positive consequence?
No.
Like, do you feel like they're interconnected? Do you feel like, I've had a miscarriage, now I've had a baby, but this baby that I've just had not means more, but has a different place because of what just happened?
No.
No, neither for me neither.
Because
they're not interconnected.
I always wanted 3. She filled her role within our family.
Okay.
And I feel like, and this may be another podcast, I feel like we're full.
Okay.
That feeling that our family is full.
You have it now.
I feel that.
Okay. When you had 2, you didn't have it.
No.
But were you sure you wanted 3? Like
Yes.
at what point?
At what point? I think I always knew I wanted more than 2. I think that from my experience, this is really my personal opinion. I really have to say, I have a sister who I love very much, and we have a wonderful relationship. But I think when there's more than 2 kids, there's this sense of a team, and that you go, and listen, you can have turmoil and drama and friction, and I think it's necessity that you do. But when shit hits the fan, the fact that there's more than one other person to kind of take on the brunt of life makes me feel like that's a positive thing. And the idea that there could be a team of, I'm here.
So you
but
had
I'm
the
not
third
always
mostly for them than for you.
That's what I did. I had 2 for them, not for me.
But it sounds like
I mean, for me also, because I'm so full of joy seeing them together. But yes, for them.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
I think it's a gift.
Yeah.
To have a team, to be on a team.
Absolutely.
And I look at the families that I know who had 3 or 4. 4 is a lot of kids, but 3 or 4. And I'm in awe of families that have more than 3 because I have 3 and that is a lot. But I just used to look at them as I was growing up, and not necessarily in when they were in elementary school or high school, whatever, but like in our 20s, when life kind of gets real, the families where there was 3 kids or 4 kids, like it just was lovely to watch. And even though that there was friction and even though that there's drama, like it doesn't matter. I still would look at those families and think like, this is really wonderful.
The same for me.
So Chris, my husband, always says, so we have 2, but I've never really closed the door on having a third. We genuinely aren't able to do that. Like we have all of our baby stuff and we can't get rid of it, and it's like kind of a constant discussion between us. Or if it's not a discussion, it's like in the backdrop of our life.
Yes.
Like this thing, will we do it? Or anyway, it would be nice to make a decision either way so that we can kind of mentally move forward with our lives. But he always says those families that are 3 to him, he's like, it's a bit, you say, but he'll say like that's a family. Like they're full. They're like that's a full house. I'm like, but we're 4 and that's a family, and but
It's pretty full.
But he
Yes.
sees 3 as
Does he have 3?
he's alone, but from a difficult family situation,
Yeah.
he's always has been sort of upset that there wasn't
More.
that there wasn't more.
Me too.
You feel that way?
I had Maddie for Maya and I think that
Because
the 3 of us have experienced the same kind of trauma with our fathers leaving us too early. But I think that had I had a brother or a sister to kind of manage that with me, I would have managed it a lot different than I did. I don't know. And when I see them together, obviously it brings me so much joy.
Yeah.
There was a moment where I said, let's have 3. But now Maddie's like in between 16 months, and it's hard at 16. In between 12 and 18 months, I find it really hard. So we kind of nixed that, but that's neither here or there.
I mean, going from 1 to 2 was one of the hardest things I've done. I think I've told you that before.
Oh, yeah. For me, 0 to 1, but
0 to 1, I was okay. It was 1 against 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You constantly have a trial.
1 to 2 was really hard. And 2 to 3, it's a different type of hard.
Is it just like kind of adding one to the mix? And by then your
So
oldest
logistics,
is much older, so it can kind of help, no?
Yeah, I think I said this last time. I've done baby.
Yeah.
A tantrum doesn't faze me.
Yeah.
Like I'm good.
Yeah.
It's the new stuff that's
sure.
hard.
For your eldest.
So for my eldest.
Yeah, definitely.
So the hard part about going from 2 to 3
was still focusing on 1.
I'm still trying to figure out like what's grade 1 look like, what's grade 2 look like, what's grade 3 look like.
Because then you can repeat, kind of.
You have an understanding and like
what's coming.
Some sort of of what's coming. So
Yeah.
you kind of can manage differently.
Yeah.
You have more perspective. But so the challenge of having a baby when you have 2 kids, I think one was 4, one was 6, like something like that, is that you're going backwards to like routines and sleep stuff and diapers and having diapers with me. Like, I don't think I ever carried a baby bag in the 3rd time, but the first time, boy, did I have the best baby bag and it was full, but now I have like a diaper and a package of wipes that I just throw in the car and it is what it is. So it's just like going backwards to a time where I thought I was done.
Mm-hmm. It's the logistics of it though, isn't it?
It's the logistics.
I'm just like that. Logistically, sometimes I'm like,
because like we can't go to the park now because the baby's sleeping, and we can't go to the, so we have to do it during our windows. Remember windows?
Yes.
Like when you had windows of time to do things. I couldn't do that for a little bit. But now as my little one's getting older, she's 2.5 now. Like now we're starting to be back to being able to do stuff.
Yeah.
Do you find that time is going by faster with a 3rd?
Maybe.
Okay.
I know I'm in it because she's only 2.5, but I'm less in it where I'm like in the trenches.
So involved in everything.
I think it's also how far apart you have your kids.
Okay.
My first 2 are 2 years apart. I had 2 babies.
Yeah.
2 babies is a lot.
A lot.
It's a lot of physical work.
It's a lot of dependency on you.
Physically, many, many, many times I was carrying 2 babies.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like that's a physical
And when they're
piece.
sick and when they have a meltdown, they both want mom. And it's like, it's a lot. It's hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if you have more space in between 1 and 2, it's inevitably like you have someone that can independently take themselves to the bathroom. Whereas when you have 2 babies, like you're carrying the other one to go to the bathroom upstairs and then you're running and this one's eating and like, you know.
But then if you space your third one too much, which is our concern because my eldest is now 4.
How old's your youngest?
My youngest is 4. My eldest is going to be 7 in the fall. Is you think, well, you look at the 2 together and this incredible bond and really friendship that they have, and you think the third, well, third's going to be a laggard. Like if you're going to have them to be together, like with the 4-year plus age gap, as time wears on, it feels more and more difficult to imagine having a third because how do they fit into this 2 dynamic?
So,
you know,
I can only tell you from my experience, but my youngest and my middle are almost 4 years apart. And my eldest 2, they are a duo. They love each other. They are a duo and they always have been because they were babies together.
Yes.
Right? And then here comes this little cute with a big personality. And it's shifting. The middle one and the little one are a little bit of a duo. The baby and the big one are a little bit of their own duo. So
they can choose.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But I think it's as adults too, like as you go through life, right? Like sometimes my sister and I relate on something and we talk all the time and we're inseparable. And sometimes we're in very different places in our life. But imagine then you had a third person who was like, oh, but then you know, like you kind of align.
Depending on what you're going
I want to bring up the Kardashians because I think it's a really good example of siblings.
Sure.
But, right? Like I don't know. I watched the show.
They're also like 7 or whatever.
Yes, but when you have siblings in different points in your life, you relate to different siblings at different times.
Yeah.
And I think it gives that opportunity. But yeah, I think the space apart is more about like you and managing.
What I think we have to figure as a couple is whether we are still thinking about a third because we miss that time of of when our children were little, or is it because we want a third?
You want to grow your
or
family.
are we just like so filled with love for that time and sort of warm and fuzzies for that time?
Yeah.
And that's why we can't part with our baby.
2 things can be true.
Yeah.
Yes.
It can be both, and that's okay.
Okay, but can I be the rational, logical person for just a hot sec? And I think, and you are a logical, rational person.
Most of the time.
Yeah. You need to also consider that it's more expensive to have another child.
Yeah.
And that you, as a human being, let's say you have 100% of capacity, like now we're dividing by 3.
Yes.
Right? Like, so those are important
output.
things also. I currently do not have a full-time job. And when I had my third, I was like, I'm going to go back to work. And as Paula can attest, it lasted me 3 months. And then I was out because I physically could not handle how much
attention,
physical and emotional, plus having a full-time job. And I know that there are many families and parents where both parents work and they have many more kids than me. But I can only speak to my own capacity, and with the sick days and the this days and the that days, and I was constantly, and I have to pick up, I have to do homework, and I just couldn't physically take care of all 3 kids in the way that I decided that I wanted to take care of them, or that we decided that we wanted to take care of them. With the job that my husband has and the travel that he does, whatever, it was not possible.
Yeah.
So yes, you have to figure out what you want, and is it for them, and is it for you, and whatever. But also, it's really important to sit down and be like, okay, what will it look like?
Yes.
Because what will it look like? I didn't think it was going to look like this. It looks like this. I'm very happy and blessed and grateful, but it's hard. The logistics are hard.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much for joining us and sharing your stories, and we hope to see you guys soon on another podcast.
Always a pleasure, Paul.
You've been listening to We've Probably Been There, a podcast by First Moms Club. Follow First Moms Club on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Watch us on YouTube and Spotify, and listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Join us next week for more stories about this roller coaster we call motherhood. Thank you for listening.